you. The question that I had in my mind when listening to Leanne was, what is it in Leanne that triggered that horror that she had just from that TV or hearing about that research that triggered her into action? There's something within you that made you switch over like that a lot of other people don't. Our science doesn't reach people in that way, or our education or our artworks or what's displayed in the media doesn't flip that switch for many people. So maybe, Sally, you could psychoanalyse Leanne and find out what...
Feel free to lie down, Leanne. What I was going to say, I think you articulated so beautifully, was your grief. And grief is something we all have, either we consciously feel it or it's unconsciously there. And we're very frightened of it. Like I was noticing when I came in on the wall, it's yours, Jonathan, someone had written, is it difficult or challenging to voice your concerns? And something over there says, how close can you safely get? And I think we do defend a lot against our feelings of grief, but what you so beautifully expressed was when we can go into that grief and really acknowledge it, it can be deeply motivating when we give it time. And yeah, I can see it's really affected you. And it's for all of us. I mean, it may be for you a share what it's for someone else. It's the state of the coral, or it's any number of loss of species that's going on. And how do we safely acknowledge that grief? And I think as an artist, art is a great place to put your strong feelings. And there's a lot of feelings in this room underneath what's going on. And if we can all hold them for ourselves and with each other and trust that feelings, which is so often symbolised by water, will move us somewhere, and they'll move us towards our passion. And as you said, you have this great passion to do something, and we all have something we can contribute with passion. And if we allow ourselves to feel something of that sadness and grief, it actually will fuel us and take us to a creative place. Yeah.
That's a incredibly positive way to conclude the main part of the panel discussion. And thank you so much for that. It was wonderful. And Leanne, for sharing that with us. We've got time for a couple. We've got actually we've gone longer than I thought we would, which has been great. We've got time for I think a couple of questions. If anyone has any burning questions, rather than long statements, please ask them now. And Anita, do you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to say something about the walls, and it's sort of following on from Sally and Leanne, and also sort of what Jonathan was saying before about validity and obliteration and all those sort of things. It feels really quite subversive, us sort of creating this space where people can actually come in and grab chalk when we're not here and write on the walls. And moderating what's actually put on the walls has been one of the biggest challenges, because, how do we actually decide what is a valid response, even if someone's coming in, they're not really engaging with the works, but they see that there's a piece of chalk and that people are writing on the walls, and they think, oh, I'm going to draw this big love heart and say I love X and Y and Z. But is that really doing what we want to have in this space? And sort of how do we actually try and facilitate more interaction with the works and conversations about the actual topic of the exhibition? But it's an ongoing issue that we have with this kind of a presentation. But I just wanted to make a note of that it is a really strong consideration that Lisa and I have on a daily basis when we come in. We have a look to see what's on the walls. We're taking photographs of everything, including the things that we end up rubbing off. So I think we've had a few phalluses sort of on the walls, and that kind of stuff as well. And that's, we even ummed about that, it's biology, is it sort of, should we leave it up there? But, there's the university context as well. So, we're just trying to, I guess, take as many people's, assumptions about what the space should be into consideration. But I just wanted to make a note about that, and that, you might see some blurry bits on the walls, and that is because we are moderating what's actually going up there. But we'd really like you guys to sort of have a think about what's been talked about tonight, and grab a piece of chalk and sort of see what other people have written on the walls, and even right responses or questions to the scientists and artists that have sort of contributed to this exhibition that we're sort of very lucky to have had the chance to sort of facilitate this exhibition of. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Question, please.
Hi. So I'd like to direct this to the anthropologist. I've forgotten your
Jonathan.
name. Jonathan. I was really interested in what you had to say earlier, and I was thinking about the nature of the kind of sedative effect that has kind of come across everybody and why we don't take action. And you mentioned the fact that climate change is such a large topic that it feels hard, where do you start? I guess taking that one step further, climate change is one cause, one issue of many issues in the world. And there are many causes out there. They're all vying for our attention. We could go to Syria or the Ukraine or feminism or global poverty. And a lot of these are linked. And also it goes back to Leanne's that switch. I'd like to know what you think about. How does a cause choose you, or how do you choose a cause, or how many causes should you choose?
Well, I think I basically agree with Sally at this point, that whatever pulls you as a passion is something that you should do. Okay, so you don't have to necessarily be intellectually coherent, because the coherence may come at other levels that you're not yet aware of. But basically, the other thing is also, as you say, that everything is connected. And that's part of what the ecological message is, if you like, is that nothing, again, is isolate, nothing is individual. Part of the reasons why, things are happening in the Middle East has got to do with oil, and has got to do with the protection of violence, and has got to do with protest against that. And so that comes out of the way we live here. Again, part of what's happening in the Ukraine is also part of the whole political system that's going on. So, and obviously, the relationship of males to females is very much about the relationship of everybody to everybody else, and the relationship to nature. I mean, that's why even if you do psychotherapy, for instance, and that's your only action, then in some ways you are still relating to the other inside you, which may then lead you to perhaps treat the other outside you with more care and more attention and more gentleness. I mean, my feeling is that basically if you suppress your body, say, or do mean and horrible things to your body, then you are likely to do mean and horrible things to the world. Because the world, we think of the body and the world as material things often. So if you treat one set of materiality badly, then you're likely to extend that and treat another set of materiality badly. So basically, any cause that moves you, anything that you feel inculcates some kind of gentleness towards the world, some kind of creativity in problem solving, some kind of scientific attitude so that you're understanding things better, all of those things come together and make an active person. And again, the more that you become active, the more likely it is that other people will start to think this is seriously wrong too. I mean, that's the thing about human beings. We might like to think that we make our own moral decisions, but in fact, most of the time the moral decisions we make are heavily influenced by the people around us. So even if one person stands up and says, that's wrong, why do we imprison children in camps in Papua New Guinea or wherever? Why do we let people get raped and beaten up and then denounce cruelty somewhere in the Middle East? As if that's, as if they're unrelated things. If you keep saying things like that, then the chances are that other people will start questioning it as well. And if enough people question it, then who knows, maybe even Tony Abbott will listen. Okay, he's a human too, strange as that might seem.
Thanks, Jonathan. One final question. Question or comment?
We are talking about the environmental impact, where we human as a part of planet, there are animals also as a part of planet, But when we are making the project plan, before we execute the projects, we never consider them as a part of our stakeholder list. How about if we start, we know somehow, unconsciously, we know they are part of our life, but how about if we start putting them on black and white on paper and start connecting with them? Do you think that that would solve a lot of problems?
I don't know if it would solve the problems, but I think it's a really good thing is to always remember the amazing complexity of the context in which you're acting. So if you sort of consciously bring in nature, animals, the landscape and stuff like that every time you make a decision, as well as any other number of things, then you are likely to make a much wiser decision because you're having more input and you're thinking about all the different connections. So I think that's a really good idea, and I think that's another simple thing that people can do. Though they might think you're mad at work, perhaps you don't have to tell them immediately. But nevertheless, it will again permeate through the whole workplace if you actually do it. Anybody else want to say anything?
There is the concept of ecosystem services, which doesn't just incorporate animals, but all components of the ecosystem, so marine phytoplankton and terrestrial plants, which is what I work on, things that provide for humans. So even when you're talking about the stakeholders, if people are not listening to you saying, well, what about the bunnies? You can also bring it back to the valuable functions of the ecosystem, which are even being quantified. And I think that it's become a cynical exercise now because we're always talking about ecosystem services in terms of almost like trying to equate it with a monetary value. Bill, you probably are better versed in this sort of topic than me.
Yes. It is possible to incorporate those things that you mention in some measure of value and worth of ecosystems. And there are lots of scientific procedures to do that. And then if at a broader level, the whole concept of environmental impact assessment says you must take account of impacts on the organisms in the environment and the physical environment as well. So there are means and ways of doing what you envisage should happen. We're just not used to thinking of the flora and fauna as stakeholders. But it's a very useful metaphor for I think, conveying that same message to other people who are not either not experts in the field or not particularly engaged in the language of science. The stakeholder metaphor is a really good one, I think.
Yeah, I think it's actually better than the ecosystem services thing because that basically turns everything into money. So, if you throw more money at it, then you can kill heaps and heaps of stuff because you've recompensed them by your money, or you've said, oh, that's a loss I can take. But you don't normally go out and kill your shareholders. Okay, so that's probably a better way of actually getting people together. Okay, so I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to draw the forum to a close, and I would like to thank Dale, Kiralee, Charlotte, Leanne, Andy, Sally and Jonathan for their contributions tonight, and Anita and Lisa for bringing us all together in this amazing environment. And thank you all for participating. So please join me in thanking everyone. And I'd like to invite you to participate in Leanne's groundswell work by writing your comments on the bits of paper or the wall, and joining us now, either here or when we move across the road, to continue talking.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to thank Professor William Gladstone as well, Bill, for emceeing tonight as well, because this has been a really fascinating forum and thank you very much for Adam and Seb for recording.
Thank you.